Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening and welcome to our weekly Saturday night online halaqah, where we learn from the beginning of guidance or Bidayatul Hidayah by Imam Al-Ghazali. And tonight, you have the very special honor of being hosted by myself and Brother Amir for a recap session, inshallah. So we usually hold these every couple of sessions to give a chance for everyone to catch up, where we give a summary of everything we've learned over the past few weeks, past month or so that anyone can watch these, come up to speed, and join us next week to move on with the book with our Imam, our teacher, Ustaz Zaki, inshallah. So if you're new here, if this is your first time, this online halaqah live stream is hosted by Suffa Mosque London, which is run by the umbrella charity, the Suffa Educational Foundation. And we are the first registered Islamic charity here in London, in the UK, which is run by and primarily focused on the audience who are the Muslim Malay and Southeast Asian communities living in the UK and Europe. And of course, by extension, we are open to the whole of humanity. And we run purely on the donations of our dear supporters, the community, and corporate companies that believe in our mission of making Fardu Ain foundational knowledge accessible for all, and to provide a place for people to practice that knowledge as well through gatherings and other services which we provide. So, to begin tonight, as is customary here at Suffa Mosque London, I will invite Brother Amir to begin the evening with Quran and Qasida, inshallah. Tafaddal, Sidi.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين. صدق الله العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله يا صاحب الأنوار يا ذا اللي والمعقود يا صفوة الجبار يا ذا التقى والجود لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لولاك يا ذا الشان ما سارت الركبان نوديت بالمختار والمصطفى المحمود لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله طابت بك الأوقات يا من أتى رحمتي يا سيد السادات يا كاشف الغمات لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلاة ذي التعظيم بار العلا الأوحاد مع أكمال التسليم عليك يا أحمدي لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه
اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. وصلى الله عليك وسلم يا رسول الله في كل لمحة ونفس عدد ما وسعه علم الله. وصلى الله عليك وسلم يا رسول الله في كل لمحة ونفس عدد ما وسعه علم الله. وصلى الله عليك وسلم يا رسول الله في كل لمحة ونفس عدد ما وسعه علم الله. Alhamdulillah. We begin tonight's online Halaqah revision session with praise towards our Lord, our Creator, Rabbul Jaleel, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we thank Him for allowing us to come here together to learn about Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and His beloved Messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and what our ulama have shared with us, have taught us, have guided us with in their precious words and books. And we thank Allah for allowing us to have all of these ni'mas of coming together, of peace and safety, of time and health, access to technology, access to internet, all of these things which we take for granted. Thank you everyone for joining us here today. And we also begin tonight with salutations upon our beloved Rasul, Al-Mustafa, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. in this blessed month of Rabi al-Awwal, the month where Nur al-Huda, the light of guidance, was gifted to us, all of humanity. Muhammad ibn Abdullah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and we celebrate every day, but especially during this month in which he was born, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we're coming up to the final week of Rabi al-Awwal. So in case you feel like you've not done anything, you feel like you've not thought about the month, or had time to reflect upon it, or send extra salawat, or do something extra in this coming week, try your best to learn about Rasulullah SAW, to listen to stories about his seerah and how he acted, and to send abundant salawat upon him. Okay, so tonight, as we mentioned earlier, you have myself and you have Amir, and we are just like all of you. We are students of Ustaz Zaki, and we learn in these halaqas with all of you. So we're on the same level with all of you. We're not the teacher, but rather today, Ustaz asks us to share what we've learned and to revise and recap from the student's perspective what we've taken in. And alhamdulillah, tonight we've been able to summarize some of the learnings from this section into some slides, about 6 slides. So we're going to use those as prompts tonight to guide us through our conversation. But just to set context, we are at the end of this book, which is called The Beginning of Guidance. And this final chapter or section is about the etiquettes and the relationship that we have, and the manners in those relationships between us and Allah, our Creator, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and us and all of creation. So at the beginning of the chapter, Imam Al-Ghazali has been categorizing all the different types of people we'll meet. Our scholars, etiquette towards scholars, etiquette towards students, and we slowly move towards the section we are in now, which is the etiquettes of friendship, of brotherhood, companionship. And interestingly, just before we moved to the section on etiquettes with friendship, we talked about etiquettes with people we do not know, strangers. And Imam Al-Ghazali warned us to basically spend as little time as possible with people who we do not know, and to avoid getting entangled and too involved with strangers, because we have to focus and protect ourselves. So just before we go into specifically these etiquettes and lessons about friendship and companionship, maybe I wanted to share one of the things Ustaz highlights every session, which is that when we learn about these qualities we're looking for in our friends, it's not because we're looking down on other people, but rather it's because we ourselves are in a lowly, rotten state. And if we are surrounded by bad company, we will go down the route that they're going, because we're not strong enough. We're not, we don't have a fortified foundation. So because of that state that we're in, we seek the best company, because surely we are on the religion of our friends, of our companions. So we seek the best company to raise ourselves, to raise us, to make us better, because we're so rotten. And before we jump into the slides, Amir, I'm going to call you to the stage here just to share some of your own thoughts, reflections on this section before we dive into it.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Rushdi, for the edifying and really clear exposition of what we've been learning so far. I think I can only echo your words, in terms of what we've learned so far when it comes to etiquette of companionship. I think we're the fact that it's at the end of the book, and I was just reminiscing as to how near, mashallah, we are to the end of the book. And I think I was reflecting on why it came at the end um, of the book, and I guess these are just some ruminations, but I think one of the reasons why acquaintances, why the Imam might have put this particular chapter at the end is because um, I think the beginning of any relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to start with Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, has to start with understanding the deen and understanding what's required in terms of ibadah and what's required in terms of knowledge and of study and of embodying ourselves with good character and removing uh, bad character. um, and I think if we don't have if we don't have the fortitude, and if we don't work on the foundations within ourselves and fortify our defenses, then most likely the world will end up you know um, bringing us down, the world. And because if we struggle with our own nafs, right, then what about the world, and what about dunya, and what about the company we keep? That's gonna chip away at all the weak fortifications that we might have. So I think, mashallah, um, and I think we live at a time now where, um, in some ways, people have never been so distant from one another. That there's a lot of social media and there's a lot of interaction online, but there's a lack of real heart-to-heart interaction of souls, interacting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're very fortunate, and I myself personally am very fortunate to be blessed by Allah to have the privilege of gatherings like these,
Mm-hmm.
where you know we we talk about these things, and we share very, very personal things, and very and it's blessed companionship, and it's blessed company. And I think, yeah, I think we're in an age where people seek companionship, right? But at the same time, there's so much out there there's so much bad company, and there's not just from other people, but we ourselves, like you said, can be bad company for others. So I think, mashallah, like for us, um you know for reading this chapter, kind of summarizes everything that the Imam have been talking about. Without solid foundation, and without the constant pursuit of removing ourselves of bad character, and embellishing ourselves with good character, how are we going to withstand the world and people around us, and how are we going to be good company for others, right? And how are we going to be a force of good and a force of blessing in this world? So I think that's been the most clarifying and edifying kind of um, conclusion that I've got so far, having kind of gone through this chapter.
Inshallah. I've never actually reflected on why is this the final section of the book, which is a really good point. Because though it is, you know, the beginning book, the beginning of guidance, it's a doorway book. It's really comprehensive, and there's a lot of stuff in there that we covered. But to end on companionship is actually, it's quite deep. It makes me think, actually, what comes to mind is, I'll be paraphrasing, but there's that interaction in the hadith where someone came and questioned Rasulullah SAW, when will the hour be? When will the end of times be? And Rasulullah SAW just asked him back, what have you prepared for it? And he said something very interesting. And he said, along the lines of, I have nothing except my love for Rasulullah SAW, my love for you. And Rasul replied, sallam, you will be with those whom you love. And, we are at the end of times, as we know, it's very clear. And let alone what's going on around us ourselves are so weak. And we fall into so many different major and minor sins on the daily, sadly, all of us. And obviously, we won't get any salvation into paradise except through Allah's rahmah with us. But from this hadith, you will be with those whom you love. So obviously, the first love is towards Rasul, so that we can be with him in the highest of paradise, in nearness to him, the best of creation. But in addition to that, is obviously we have love for our companions, our friends. So if you surround yourself with companions who love the Rasul, they will be with him. And if your love for the Rasul is not great enough, you will be with those whom love him, who are with him. So you'll go with them as well. Which is why it's a beautiful chain of everyone, bringing each other up to the Prophet. And it's just like salawat. This love is like the ultimate play card you have in your deck for us, especially here at the end of the times when we're so weak and we're surrounded by such difficulty. It's just the salawat and the love of the Prophet ﷺ and the companionship of those who love him that is really all that will save us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think it's incumbent upon us all at this time, to make it a priority to learn books like these that allows us to you know create the capacity in our hearts to fully love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because if we don't make space for love for him sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's going to be occupied by other things, right? So I think part of creating that space for to love him sallallahu alaihi wasallam, part of our effort and our adab is to remove things from our heart that yearns towards the worldly things, and you know not only the obvious haram things, but even things that are mubah, that are you know permissible, but might lead us to to forgetfulness or ghafla. So I, I I think, yeah, one of the I guess one of the take home messages as I've been learning this book and also learning about tasawwuf generally is that I guess that's an ongoing process, and it's a beautiful process to be part of, to constantly make room, to constantly remind yourself to create, you know to purify your heart and to remove the things of this, the yearning of the world, and to yearn instead for the ultimate company. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's company is the ultimate company, isn't it? Yeah.
Inshallah. That's that. Yeah, inshallah. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good transition into the section now about friends, because just like you said, there's categories of deeds: disliked, liked, permissible, forbidden. Companions or people in this world that we'll meet and we'll spend time with fall into different categories as well, as we'll find out. And as Ustaz mentions often in this world, it's not a case of what's right and wrong, what's good or bad, but it's what's okay and what's good and what's better. So I think that's what we'll find out as we go into this section. So we're going to share the slides now, and we're going to talk about the section on brothers and friends, or companions, friendship. Okay, let's see. Just going to make sure it's not too cut off. Okay, can you see that, Amir?
I can indeed, Sidi.
Okay. we will go with this layout for now. So now to the recap session. Imam Al-Ghazali tells us, before we even talk about the etiquettes of friendship, he's going to tell us more about what is a friend and how to find a friend. And he says to us, before entering into a relationship of companionship or friendship, you have two duties, okay? And the book says, the first duty is to check for the presence of 5 qualities. And 5 is a good number. We have 5 fingers on a hand, on a natural hand, usual hand. So it's a good way to remember all of these qualities. And we should remember what we are taught. So the first duty of friendship is to check for these 5 qualities: intellect, good character, uprightness, absence of greed, and honesty. And we'll go more into these later. And the second duty here, after we've fulfilled that first one, is to respect and fulfill the rights of that friendship. Because Imam Al-Ghazali says, once you've entered into that relationship of companionship and friendship, then you have to live up to the duties required by that kind of relationship. So those are the 2 duties. Now we're going to move on now and focus on duty number 1. So Imam Al-Ghazali says to check for the presence of these 5 qualities. And as we mentioned earlier, it's not because we are putting ourselves above other people and we're looking down on them and ranking them on their qualities that we see in them. Rather, we're searching for the best of people to raise us out of the rotten state we're in. And I summarized these 5 into this graphic some people who play video games might be familiar with. I don't know if you've ever played any football games, Amir, but
Oh yeah, this definitely takes me back to some football games I've played. Yeah, where I think it summarizes the characteristics in a really clear way. Yeah.
That's right. So for anyone who's never played, for example, a football game, often in a football game, it ranks the different types of football players you can use based on different stats, such as their pace, how fast they can go, their defensibility, their attackability, things like that. And you have this kind of 5-point pentagon, and obviously some are stronger than other points. So there's 5 qualities that we should look for in a person, in a friend specifically. And maybe we'll take it in turns, Amr, to speak a bit more about each one, just in brief. So the first one Imam Al-Ghazali talks about is intellect. And here, reading from the book, he says, there's no good in friendship with a foolish person, because that kind of friendship will only end in estrangement or breaking off relations. And in fact, for an intelligent, they say, to have an intelligent enemy is sometimes better than a foolish friend. MashaAllah. And this is deep, because the friend who's foolish is someone who's close to you, has proximity to you. And if they are foolish, they can harm you and others around you without even realizing it or intending it. And you want to protect yourself from that. And if you want to go to good character, Amir.
Yeah, sure. So the Imam then follows it with good character, which is quality number 2. And the Imam says, do not be friends with a person of bad character, that is, someone who cannot restrain his anger or control his desire. And then he follows with a summary from the scholar Al-Qama Al-Utaridi, may Allah have mercy on him, who summarized that the traits of good character in the counsel that he gave to his son when he was near to his death, which talks about the attributes of someone who takes another person as a friend and the rights that that friend deserves in terms of good character, whether it be providing during financial need, or if you need help in something good, then that person assists you in it. um, and also stopping that friend from doing something bad. So um, and also someone who trusts what you say. So a friend with good character, if you say something, he will believe you and he will support you and he will have your back, right? And who accepts your leadership in something that you take on. Um, and if you were to dispute with this friend, part of the good character is to prefer you to himself. So he would let you win out of his good character and adab towards you. So a lot of really important qualities summarized just within good character, mashallah.
MashaAllah. And I think um, that's definitely true because, as we know, their famous hadith that the Prophet ﷺ did not come except to perfect good character. And he
Mm,
teaches what that is, because really good character is such an important one, because it's a synthesis of all the other things. You will have good
mm,
character if you are honest and upright and
mm.
don't love the world. But moving on
Mashallah.
to number 3, uprightness, as-salah. So here he says, to befriend someone who has fear of Allah, because if you befriend a wrongdoer who persists in committing major transgressions, then you become desensitized towards those things, even if they are constant upon a small sin, small misdeed. When you're surrounded by that all the time, you become desensitized to it, and it will affect you. And you might think that's that's not a big thing, it's not a bad thing, and slowly you crumble as well. So rather, you want someone who's upright, who remembers Allah, because that will remind you of Allah as well, because we all need reminding of Allah.
Yeah, and I think that's a real thing, because in a way that's what peer pressure is. um you know, it's either we're gonna lift that person up or that person's gonna bring us down. By it might just start by laughing at something that's actually a major sin, right? And that laughter then becomes like a trivialization, like, oh, maybe it's not that bad, um and then it degrades from there. So I think that's a very real possibility. And really, what's the likelihood of us in our weak state of bringing a friend up as opposed to us being brought down together? So it's a scary thought.
Yeah, mashallah, nail on the head. Definitely, that's a very good
Mm.
question. Definitely, we're not going to be the ones raising others.
I mean,
So
Shaitan is there playing his tricks as well. So there's
that's
a
right.
lot of things affecting, mashallah. So
Uh,
the, yeah, go
just
ahead,
just
Sidi.
before we move on,
Yeah.
actually, because some of these things might be a bit too conceptual. How do you know someone is upright? So Imam Al-Ghazali here highlights one specific thing, actually. So, and it's a very short book. So the fact that he's highlighted this sin or this sign of someone not being upright means that it's important. And there's lots of outward signs of uprightness, like doing your 5 daily prayers, or maybe you'll see them giving charity and wearing nice, pious-looking clothing. But this book is about going deeper than that. We're looking at the hearts. So what's one of the signs that someone's heart is upright? And this is if they do or don't do the sin of backbiting, speaking about someone else when they're not there. And
Mashallah.
this is really key in the context of talking about friends and companions, because this comes up in conversation all the time, speaking about other people. And so the sign that someone is upright is that they don't do that, except maybe to speak positively and highly of someone else.
Mashallah. Then yeah, and I think that the sometimes there's a lot of danger in filling conversations, right? The awkward silence. So sometimes we feel um obliged to fill in the silence. And actually, sometimes the quality of a friendship is in how you can be together in silence, as opposed to whether you can fill a space with as much idle talk as possible, right? And I think I certainly like I feel like a benchmark of a mature relationship or friendship is that you can just spend time together without saying a thing sometimes, and there's
That's
more
right.
good in that. Yeah.
That's right. And you know, what quality is there in a relationship if all you do is talk about other people? You know,
Yeah.
um,
Mashallah.
that's not a friendship. That's something else.
If yeah, at best it's probably an alliance, like, because what happens when when that person has changed and you
That's
have
right. That's
nothing
a good
else to
word.
talk about?
It's an alliance,
It's an
and it's
alliance.
alliance
Yeah.
on badness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an ill-hearted alliance.
Right.
And for example, just to talk about this more, Imam Al-Ghazali gave an example during his time where he says people would see a gold ring on a jurist, on someone who's pious, and be so uppity and angry about that, and so righteous about why is he wearing gold? Why is this man wearing gold? Which obviously is not allowed.
Mm.
However, seemingly they're completely fine with everyone in their company backbiting everyone, and they themselves backbiting the jurist or the person wearing gold, which arguably is a worse and more serious offense than wearing gold. Of course, they're both not allowed, but the descriptions of backbiting someone, eating the dead flesh of your brother is very, very
Mm.
visual and
Mashallah.
serious.
Yeah, and I think just I guess just as I remember just now, that a couple of years ago in one of the Friday classes, someone asked Ustaz Zaki, how do we tell someone to stop backbiting if it's, whether when it's in a close circle, like whether it's when you're in family and then you find a family member is backbiting. I remember Ustaz Zaki gave a few options. The first and the most ideal option is to state your displeasure and ask them to stop, right? um but if you feel like you're unable to, um he says remove yourself from the situation, right? Or sorry, before that he said try and change the conversation. Yeah, talk about something else. And if you fail to do even that, like try and remove yourself from the situation, because I think sometimes we find ourselves in situations where there's backbiting going on, but we're not quite sure as how to react to it, like, do I leave, or what do I do? Do I tell them? Maybe I'm not in a position to tell them that I don't find this pleasing or this is not a good thing, right? So I think there's strategies. Ustaz Zaki highlighted some really good strategies in order to avoid backbiting.
In fact, I was speaking to him recently about something similar, and he added on to that advice actually and said, with the foresight and this knowledge and knowing that it's a bad thing, you should have some wisdom in yourself and realize like patterns as well in people and in certain, not even just people, but maybe certain groups. When so and
Mashallah.
so get together, even if they're fine on their own, this kind of stuff happens.
Mashallah.
So if you know that, and if you know that you're not going to be able to speak out against it, you feel awkward, maybe don't go.
Mm,
And maybe you have a friend that consistently always talks about other people, um, and this is a pattern, then don't spend time with them in that context.
yeah, it's all about awareness. Mashallah, that's amazing. Yeah.
Sometimes we put ourselves in the situation knowingly when we could have prevented it.
100%. Yeah. Prevention is better than cure.
Yeah, there's less to
Mashallah.
be accountable for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mashallah.
All right.
Okay.
Next
So
next
number
one for
four
me.
then. So number four, we have absence of greed. So the Imam says, do not befriend a person who is greedy for this ephemeral world. Friendship with someone who is greedy for this world is a lethal poison. So he uses some really choice words.
Mm.
For human nature is designed to imitate and follow by example, and one person's nature will take from another without even realizing it. So, and that happens all the time. Birds of a feather flock together, right? So, and I think there's several terms to describe this behavior. It's called mirroring or mimicry, mimesis, but it happens on a subconscious level at times, right?
Hmm.
Just
Hmm.
sometimes when you're with a person uh, who has a particular way they move their hands, for example, you might end up doing the same. So it happens on a very subconscious level. And then the
Hmm.
Imam continues. So keeping company with one who is fervently attached to this world increases your own greed for it, while being with someone who has renounced this world would encourage your own renunciation of it. So it's pretty direct and
Yeah.
pretty clear. I
Yeah.
mean, the Imam's not mincing his words there.
Yeah. Just like the some of the other ones, like uprightness, when you get desensitized to it, because just like sinning, backbiting, things like that. Love of the world
Mm.
is a sin of the heart. So, and usually it's groups. So often, for example, maybe it's your colleagues, maybe at work. So if all your colleagues at work are into, for example, maybe something which is permissible, playing golf with your friends, but maybe they're all into it and they always play golf together and spend hours in their week playing golf, spending copious amounts of money on the gear, the sticks, everything, and all they talk about is golf. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you are in that circle, suddenly all you think about is golf and spending time playing golf. And this is no offense to the golfers out there. This is just an example of influence. Whereas if you have a friend who, maybe he he talks about his family a lot and how much he spends time with them, maybe gives gifts to them, to his own family. Maybe you get influenced, and wow, this is a person who's very giving. He's actually not attached to this world, and you kind of become into that way as well. Easy with your money, giving to family, giving to the poor.
Yeah, mashallah. And I think that's absolutely right, Rushdie. And I think yeah, I think we I mean, speaking personally, I think sometimes we're forced into we're at work, so sometimes these kind of conversations or company is enforced upon us
Mm,
because we don't get to choose our colleagues, right?
that's right.
um but I think as much as possible, um where we can, like, I think we can control those environments as much as possible, where by at least if you can't, if you can't control the environment at work, right, um you can control the environment at home and outside of work. You can make sure you have friends who don't necessarily talk about this world all the time, or you think things that are just gonna waste your time, right? Yeah. So I think, yeah, I think I rem- I remember that one of the definitions of tasawwuf was by a sheikh. I can't remember the sheikh's name, but the statement was time. The essence of tasawwuf is time management. And I think, yeah, managing company is not about just choosing the people you keep company with, but inadvertently the time that you have throughout your day, right? Because like
Mm,
you said,
mm,
golf or anything else for that matter that takes hours and hours of your day, by virtue of just the limited number of time you have in the day, you're not going to have much time for benefit,
mm.
other things that benefit your akhirah. So I think it's 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 really really important for all of us to consider, like,
I think
yeah.
what this one point four is
Mm,
actually, it's
mm,
well known even here in the West. We have the term "keeping up with the Joneses," and
mm.
that's seen as a bad thing. For example, um, your neighbor, your friends, they're all about the biggest car, the nicest renovated kitchens. Maybe they're all about, what school does your children go to, what university do your children go to. It's all about upping each other.
Yeah,
But we want to be surrounded by people who aren't interested in the world in that sense.
yeah. And I guess I I think Ustaz Zaki mentioned a few things relating to this point. Uh, he mentioned that the formula of khalwa fi jalwa, or kainun ba'inun. This idea of, even if you are surrounded, you know, in the world, because by necessity we are in the world, right? And a lot of at the time it feels like we're swimming against the current by virtue of everyone else seems to be engaged in the world, and a lot of us internally are engaged with the world and yearning for the world, but we're trying to make an effort to kind of decouple ourselves from that. So Zaki says, um, by nurturing in kind of an inward mindfulness of Allah and of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and having your adhkar, right, and having your litanies and reading your Quran, and making sure you're consistent upon these things, you can create a presence by which, even though you're externally, you might be laughing with your friends, right, and chatting and just listening to them talk about the day. Internally you're very present, and you're kind of in uzla, you're in isolation internally, but externally you're with the people. So we're not like hiding somewhere, we're not doing physical uzla, we're not like
Mm-hmm.
retreating, we're there, but we're inwardly, we're not attached to the world. And I think that's a really high station to aspire
That's right.
to. Yeah.
That's right, mashallah. And we actually, as you know, we'll get there in a minute. This is not the end of the formula. This 5-point characteristic. So let's speed through a bit so we can show everything tonight.
Yeah.
So just point 5 to finish this slide. The 5th quality to look for in a friend is honesty. Imam Al-Ghazali says, do not befriend a liar, because you will always face deception from them. They are like a mirage. They make what is far seem near, and what is near seem far. For example, you can apply that to heaven and hell. A bad friend will make it seem as if hell is so far away from your way of life. You guys are doing all these things, but you've got plenty of years left on your life. It's so far away, you've got time to repent. And then they make it seem as if Jannah is so close, so easy, so close. Whereas the whole thing is a mirage. It's a lie. And yeah, mashallah. I think it's quite self-explanatory that you do not want a friend who you cannot rely upon to be honest. It means you can't trust them either with anything, any secrets, any possessions, material, anything.
And you can't trust them on to advise you when you're doing something wrong either, right?
That's right, mashallah.
Yeah, I'll just be yes men. Subhanallah.
That's right. Okay, there's more we can say, but we should move on so we can explain this whole framework, mashallah. So there's 5 qualities there, and that's pretty extensive. And Ustaz Zaki always says, first, before looking at others, we look at those qualities in ourselves. How high do we rank on this chart? Obviously, there's a blue chart here, and we are aiming for ourselves and for our friends that we have full blue. We have maximum stats in all 5, but obviously we do not. And so Imam Al-Ghazali says, you may not find these 5 qualities present even those in the religious colleges, in the spiritual gatherings, in the masajid. You might not find these 5. And he says that because obviously these are the top places where we expect the cream of the crop, and we expect them to have the 5. And he says, you may not even find people with these 5 there. So there's 2 things you can do. A, opt for isolation and solitude. And he says here you'll find peace and safety. Just physically cut yourself off from everyone. Or B, keep your interaction with your friends proportionate to the level of these 5 qualities in them. So the better the stats they have in that 5-point chart, the more time you can spend with them. And the smaller their blue in the chart, the less stats they have in these 5 qualities, the less time you should spend with them. And this method allows us to benefit, firstly allows us to be with the people, which is the sunnah, as Ustaz said. The Prophet ﷺ was always with the people, with his family, his Sahaba, with the Quraysh and the people who did not like Islam. He's with the people for the majority of the time. Obviously, there's something to be said about actual physical isolation and moments of solitude in your week and year. But generally speaking, we are with the people. We have to work, we have to go to the shops, to the market, we have to be with our family and our extended family. So this option, this B of having proportionate relationships between people is the best way. And we're gonna swiftly go on. Now he then says there are three types, therefore, of brothers or companions. People you'll meet in your life, people that will come into your life consciously by your choice or not. If CD, you want to read through the three types of
Sure,
companions.
sure. So the brothers are of three types. Number one is a brother for the sake of your hereafter. Seek from him only support in religious practices. Secondly, a brother for the sake of your worldly life. Seek from him nothing beyond good character. And number three, a brother who is simply agreeable company, and seek from him nothing beyond being safe from his wickedness and evil. MashaAllah. And I remember Ustaz Zaki mentioned that these three represent the permissible types of friends that you can have. So we're discounting the people that you shouldn't even be friends with. So in your group of friends, there sh- there should be friends who you can rely on spiritual advice, religious advice, and good counsel and assistance with your afterlife and with your religious practice. There should be a number of friends who you could rely on for advice on worldly things. What's the fastest fiber broadband? What's the cheapest car insurance? You know, and you shouldn't expect anything beyond good character from them. You shouldn't expect them to you know teach you the religion, um or give you like even give you counsel maybe. um you should, he's a friend for the things in the world that could inshallah make your experience of the world easier and more manageable. And number three is the lowest type is simply agreeable company, someone um who's kind of there for a good time, someone um you can maybe have coffee with, and someone who you can have chit chat with. But obviously in the pretext of that, um, by being with him, you're safe from any wickedness and evil. And that goes back to the previous thing about backbiting, about you know lying, about um, you know ignorance, because so sometimes a friend is agreeable company, but a foolish friend who is agreeable company might draw you to false conclusions about things, to fake news, to all kinds of um, ideas that don't conform to Islam and the Sharia. So yeah, so I think again, we're, like Ustaz Zaki said, we're discounting the things that the Imam said you should be wary of in those five earlier qualities.
MashaAllah. That's really good to highlight. So therefore, what that means, if someone doesn't fit in any of these three categories, then you should try your best not to have them in your life. Not as in cut them out, but not let them spend time with you, or you spend time with them. So if
Mm.
you're not benefiting from them for your akhirah or your dunya, or neither are you safe from their harm. They harm you spiritually or physically. Do not be a companion with them.
Yeah, and I think that's it's as clear as that, CD. And I think maybe sometimes people might find that hard to take, and they might say, "Oh, but Rasulullah SAW spent time with everyone, the ignorant. He was
Mhm.
there. He made himself available to the ignorant, to the to people of our character." But then you have to remember, we're not Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He has been given by Allah SWT the capacity to deal with these things because of his blessed state, right?
Mm.
And he's the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so he has the capacity to deal with people from all types of backgrounds. And again, going back to Ustaz Zaki's advice, just because we're saying, okay, I'm limiting contact with you, doesn't mean we hate them. Doesn't mean we judge them. In fact, we should reverse say that and say, um, I'm the worst human being, and I I have compassion for you, and inshallah you have your journey and I have mine, but I just need to align myself with people that will improve me, right? And people that and inshallah we make dua for everybody. I think there's no room for hatred in this religion.
That's
Yeah.
right, mashallah. So then Imam Al-Ghazali goes on to say, what are these types of people? And the first type, the ones who benefit your hereafter, they are nourishment for you, and you cannot exist without them.
Inshallah.
And the second type, who can help you for the sake of your worldly life, their expertise, they are like medicine. You need them from time to time. And the third type, the someone who is just agreeable company, are like an illness, in the sense that it's not actually needed, yet they may be people in your life who are like this, and they do not necessarily give you any benefit, or you enjoy their company, but you have to be patient with them until that they are not in your they're not in that moment of you anymore. And what you can actually do with this type of person, the third type, is seek to refine your character through it. I'd just like to read that portion here where Imam Al-Ghazali mentions a parable with Isa alayhi salam, with Jesus, Prophet Jesus. And may Allah send blessings and peace upon him and upon our
Ameen.
Prophet.
Ameen.
So someone asked Isa alayhi salam, according to Imam Al-Ghazali, who refined your character? And he answered, no one refined my character. I rather saw the poor behavior of the ignorant ones, and I avoided it. And indeed he, Isa alayhi salam, spoke the truth. For if people were to avoid in themselves what they find reprehensible in others, their character would be refined without the needs of a guide.
Allahu Akbar.
So if these people who you meet in your life, and maybe you're offended by them, by the way they treat you, they treat others, you learn from it and you make sure you do not do that yourself. So therefore, whoever the person is that you meet in your life, whatever category they are, however good the 5 qualities they have, you can benefit from all of them.
MashaAllah. They're either a, a, a good example or a cautionary tale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you
And that's
can.
the beautiful thing about being a believer, just like the hadith. How amazing are the affairs of the believer? Whether it's good or whether it's bad, it's all good for the believer, as long as it draws them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
MashaAllah.
So an interesting thing to note here is with these 3 categories, for example, 1 and 2, they're not necessarily different people. A person can both benefit you in your akhirah and your dunya, and that's amazing. But it's not necessarily like that. For example,
Yeah.
maybe you have a friend who is extremely knowledgeable in the deen and very good character, but you might not go to him for help. If you have car troubles, you might go to your friend who has mechanic knowledge.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think it's really interesting because it's a really deep way of thinking about people and expertise, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Islam puts a real emphasis and importance on expertise, and you know um and in the Quran, and ask of the people of knowledge if you don't know, right? And I think this applies to friendship as well. Like, okay, know the degree of the degree of expertise that your friends can provide. And um and sometimes we're friends on autopilot, right? We don't even know their family background, let alone whether they'll be able to provide you with worldly support or religious counsel. So I think it's a really deep way of companionship. It's step away from autopilot friends and really know who your friends are, so that you can um and of course, by saying this, by virtue of being a friend to someone, know to what degree you are, where you stand in this. Are you a brother who is simply agreeable company, um and are you do you provide safety to your friends from wickedness and evil? And we pray that Allah allows us to at least do that, inshallah ta'ala.
That's right, mashallah. This is all to do with prioritizing our life and our time, because our time is so limited. We don't know how long we're going to live and how many breaths we're going to have. So we have to be, with that knowledge, we have to be so um, precise or cutthroat with who we let into who can influence us in our inner circle. And again, that does not mean that you are cutthroat and harsh to people. You do it with the utmost mercy and gentleness towards all people. This doesn't
Yeah.
give you the free pass to be harsh to people who you think can't benefit you. This is not how it works.
MashaAllah.
And so we go to the final slide, which is back to the second duty. At the beginning, we talked about the two duties of companionship, and the second duty is, once you are in that relationship of companionship with someone, which it's the duty is to respect and fulfill the rights of that friendship. And there are duties demanded by a friend, taught to us in our deen by our ulama, and we have to fulfill that. And there's two hadith here I take from the introduction to the section. The first one, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu said, "The likeness of two brothers is that of two hands. One washes the other." And you can see how they're so intertwined there. And the second hadith here from this section, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu said, "No one spends time in the company of a friend, even for a short time in the day, without being questioned later about his companionship, regarding whether he fulfilled the right of Allah Most High in it, or neglected to do so."
Allahu Akbar.
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
So this section here, once we've ascertained who our friends are, there is a big responsibility to be a friend to someone, mashallah. It's not all about demanding these certain qualities and characteristics from someone else. There's lots of responsibilities required upon you towards your friends. And this is something we're going to go into deeper as we continue the book next week with Ustaz Zaki, inshallah.
Inshallah.
But just know that this idea of companion or friend in Islam, linguistically, it's a heavy relationship that can either benefit you greatly to the highest extent to paradise and towards Rasul sallam and towards Allah, or bring you down to the fire. That's why it's such a weighty topic, mashallah.
Allahu Akbar.
So if you benefited or found today interesting, then you have to join us for the rest of the lessons, inshallah, with our actual teacher, our Imam of the Suffa Educational Foundation and CEO, Ustaz Zaki bin Ismail, inshallah. So that concludes our recap or revision for today. Apologize for running over 10 minutes, but I think we were enjoying it a bit too much, maybe.
Alhamdulillah.
Amir, you have any parting words for me, for you?
Allahu Akbar. I think, again, echoing what you said, Rushdie, if you do find these revision sessions of benefit, and if this is your first time and you came upon this program by chance, then we hope that you found it beneficial, and we hope that you join us. Even though we're at the last section of the book, there's still a lot of benefit and a lot of lessons, inshallah, that can be gleaned, and no doubt there's, Ustaz Zaki will share from his wisdom and from his knowledge, beyond what either of us can share. So please do follow on next week, inshallah, for the when inshallah the class will resume with Ustaz Zaki.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much, Amir. And once again, thank you very much to everyone who joined us here today. It's really important to us that our community, online and offline, join us in these classes and our gatherings, because the purpose of the institution is so that we can uplift the whole community, so that we can move together as a unit, as an ummah, towards the following the footsteps of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if you enjoyed or benefited from today, join us again. Share this program with your friends and family. It's completely free. And also, if you are local in London, please do follow us on social media and look out for our physical gatherings. We hold a physical gathering every Friday evening in a hall near Kensal Rise Station, literally next to it. And it's not yet been announced, but next Friday's gathering, we will be holding our annual Mawlid event, remembering Rasul Sallallahu. So please do look out on social media for the announcement of this Mawlid gathering happening next Friday at 6:30 p.m. And we hope to see you all there. If not, for everyone outside of London and around the world, we will see you at the next session of Bidayatul Hidayah, or the Beginning of Guidance, by Imam Al-Ghazali. Thank you very much. Rabi' al-Awwal Mubarak, and take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.